block a lot of weeds. That's an easy way, especially in your landscape or garden. You're doing your garden. Yes, sir.
I've got cedar around my trees. So when I get ready another season, do I go ahead and add new cedar to it, or should I clean out that old cedar and put the new in?
Add the new cedar to it because the cedar's breaking down.
Okay.
It's farming with compost. A lot of people will pull the old stuff back, put on 1 inch of compost, put the old stuff back on, and then add a new layer to bring it up to 4 inches. It works really well. Some of the other interesting things I've learned, University of Florida did some research, and I get nursery magazines that tell me about the research. People that water at night, right now, since the sun's going down, this time forward till late midnight, 2 o'clock in the morning, do better than from 2 o'clock until 10 o'clock. Now, what do the local officials tell you?
Yeah.
Water in the morning. What did the Extension Service tell you? Water in the morning. Why is that? Prevent disease. Guess what? In a drought, you don't have disease.
We don't have fun.
Where I find people have disease is when they're watering all the time, and then all of a sudden they got water restrictions, and they water in the morning. That's when the disease is. I've never seen brown patch on anybody's lawn that watered in the evening to shut off all the water. It just doesn't happen. Brown patch is on people that over-fertilize and over-water. And if you're watering all night long, you're watering right up till 10 o'clock in the morning, that's when you get the diseases. It just doesn't happen. I'm not saying it can't. It's just that any property that I've ever managed, any property that I've had to deal with, they're following instructions like I tell them to. We don't have diseases. Now, a lot of people can't do that. Just can't do it. They have so much property to water that they can't get everything done before 2 o'clock. So what's the next best way to water? You can't use an irrigation or a sprinkler system, whatever. What? Flood. Flood the area. Throw a water hose out there, turn it on full force, and just let it flood. Why is that effective?
Is that what they do with the cashew?
So, yeah. Yeah. Flooding is much more effective than sprinkler irrigation. In fact, during the drought,
Less evaporation.
Evaporation is a lot less. Because anytime you throw water into the air with any kind of sprinkler, when it goes this way, about 40 to 60% of it never hits the ground. Never hits the ground. Evaporates, it's gone. Especially on a day like today. Even if you're watering late evening, it goes. So if you're throwing it on the ground, yes, you still get some evaporation as much as 25%. But 75% of it's going into the ground. Is it going into the ground evenly? No. And that's what the difference is. Sprinkler irrigation puts it in evenly. You're going to get even a distribution of water with an irrigation system. You don't get even distribution of water with flood. But remember what I said earlier? Capillary motion, pulling the water up, pulling the water sideways, it eventually evens out much better with flooding, in my opinion. I watch rice farmers do it. I watch these guys in Castroville, these vegetable farmers and grain farmers. Flooding is very good. We know flooding has happened back in Egypt 3,000 years ago. We watched the Peruvian people do it over 2,000 years ago. Flooding works. Now, it takes a heck of a lot of water to flood, but I'm going to answer your question. I know what you're getting ready to ask. How long between waterings? It always comes up, doesn't it? See? I knew it was going to come up.
Particularly when you got a small cistern.
When you got a small system, that's right.
Yeah.
What does flooding do? It saturates the soil. And so when the soil is saturated, it takes much longer than if the soil were dry and you're trying to put water in it. Anybody ever had a dry sponge and try to put water on it? It doesn't work. You got to shove it into the water and squeeze and squeeze and squeeze before you finally get water. Well, that's like our soil. takes dry soil and you try to get it wet, what happens? The water runs off. And in droughts, people that have sprinkler systems do just that. They go out there and try to irrigate, try to get it wet. And if they have very little grass, what happens? It runs off. People that have lots of grass, for the most part, goes into the soil. That's great. That's what you want. But again, you're wasting a lot of water. Never is enough. When you flood, throwing the hose on the ground, flooding an area, move it, get the area flooded. As the moisture evens out by capillary motion, you can go a week, 2 weeks, sometimes 3 or 4 weeks, depending on how much organic matter you have in the soil. That's why it's so important to get that organic matter in the soil. The more organic matter in the soil or above the soil, even above the soil, the longer that moisture is going to stay there, the longer it's going to stay wet. That makes sense? It really does when you think about it. So, if you have a sprinkler system and you've got water, how do you do that? Your first pass is a real short one. You know, most of these irrigators say 20, 30, 40, 50 minutes, an hour, first pass? No. 15, 20 minutes at the most. Then you come back an hour later and you wet. If you take that dry sponge and you spritz it, then you go in and start pouring water on it, it absorbs it so much faster. That's what you're doing. First little pass, gets it moist, starts evening out the water on top of the ground, breaks that crust, contracted like that. Breaks that crust up. The second pass then is 20, 30, or 40 minutes, depending on your soil type. Then you wait another hour and you water again. Now if you started at 8 o'clock and you watered for 15 minutes, 8:15. An hour later, 9:15. Started for, let's say you just ran for an hour, 10:15. You're over with at 10:15. At 11:15, you come back and start it again. You're finished at 12:15. There you go, 3 times. You've captured the most water. Now, if we're in a severe drought, maybe you can water the 4th time. You're still there before 2 o'clock. Disease, it's not going to happen. You probably won't have to water for another 2 weeks. Even if you have another water day, don't take advantage of it unless you need to. How do we know when we need to water?
My plants just go.
The plants will. Nope, that's not it.
And the grass is crispy.
Pardon?
My grass is crispy.
Well, your grass is crispy. That's too late.
You leave footprints in the grass?
When you leave footprints in the grass. Now, this is obviously watering lawns and not, tomato plants or something like that. But if we're talking about lawns, you go out at 11 o'clock, if you can go out at 11 o'clock, and you walk across your lawn. You come back at noon, you take a look at it. If you can see your footprint, it's time to water. If you can't see your footprint, you water. It doesn't need it, because the plant has enough hydraulic pressure to push that grass back up. Otherwise, it doesn't. You like it back down or push it. Yes, ma'am.
Did they have a moisture meter or thing that you put in the ground?
They don't work.
Doesn't work?
I mean, I carry one. But why do I carry one? Because I do 500 or 600 probes, and then I can decide if there's really moisture. Because I also dig holes and I actually feel the soil. And I actually take a soil sample with a fork and I take